Another episode of With the Chiefs.
Wait. Man, I need more rest.
I hope I've got your last name right there.
It's a very good pronunciation.
You should know better than that now, Donald.
I know.
All right, welcome back to another episode of With the Chiefs. Today, we're lucky to be joined by James Scanlan. James is an ultra-endurance triathlete based in San Francisco, California, who recently completed Ultraman Australia, which was held in Noosa. He finished in sixth place with a time of 25 hours, 12 minutes and 44 seconds. For context, the Ultraman Triathlon is a 3-day event with the following distances. Day 1 is a 10K swim and 140K bike. Day 2 is a 281.1 kilometer bike. And day 3 is an 84.3 kilometer run. If anyone saw my 50K run on Strava, which is a bit uncharacteristic, this is me essentially pacing and fueling James. So James, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We normally do a bit of a training update. So what's been happening with you over the last week in terms of training?
There's a certain times in life where you end up getting busy at work, and then training is not what you'd like to train, it's what you can get in. Yeah. And it was very lopsided. I managed to do like a 1 9-mile tempo run in San Diego midweek, so 9 miles only. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I lumped in 30 miles in 3 runs. And then, and that was it. And then I had a race yesterday on the 4th of July, a 5K, in which I did exactly the same time as my last 2 5Ks. So I'm not improving, but I'm also not getting worse. So there you go.
Well, that's all right. What was the time?
It was 17:39, which is what I keep doing. And it's not as fast as I would like to do. It's pretty much near my 10-mile pace, like almost exactly. But haven't been able to get my legs a little bit faster. But to be fair, I don't really train for 5K, just like I don't really train for anything. I just omni train, and then I do all these races that are entertaining.
Yeah. How does the 5K sit with you in terms of, do you like the 5K at all or not really?
I mean, it's mercilessly short, even though it seems like it's infinitely long. Anybody who's raced a 5K knows, every distance, it doesn't, Usain Bolt makes 100 meters be really painful, right? It's like every race you go as hard as you can for that distance. So it kind of doesn't really matter what the distance is. They're all going to hurt.
Yeah. 100%. If obviously anyone's raced a hard 5K, it's pretty much, it's all relative. Yeah.
It's as fast as you can go for that distance all the time. And the whole time, unless you're attacking, you're falling behind.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. All right. So, just to get into it a little bit, just a bit of background on like how you got started in these kind of longer events, or even go back a little bit further. Like, did you start with running, or how'd you get started in endurance?
Sure. I'm a lifelong runner. I've been running for over 40 years competitively. I didn't race for about 20 something years, but I ran in high school, college, and marathoned a bit afterward. And at that time, marathon seemed like a long way. And why would you ever need to go further than 26.2? That seems like plenty of running. And then I kind of just, I didn't do anything competitive for a long time. And then somebody turned me on to a Gran Fondo bicycle event maybe 7 years ago, where Levi's Gran Fondo in Northern California, a nice little 103-mile event where you go and you chat with people and you eat at the rest stops and then hammer in between, and it's a good time. And I got so excited and enjoyed that so much that I signed up for 13 events of various sorts that year. including a bunch of double century bike rides, which is a 200-mile bike event. And then I just kept doing things and signing up for things. And now this year I'm going to be doing 40 events in the year.
That's insane.
Yeah, from kind of, well, a mile is the shortest I've raced. I raced a master's mile twice this year, 5 minutes apart. Our team had people on the 40 age group and the 50, and they didn't have enough people for the 40. So I ran one race and then changed my bib and then ran another race, and then as long as 100 miles. So yeah. I'm just kind of all over the place, but just kind of fell into the longer events more or less by happenstance. It just kind of, I just started running further and further to train for a marathon. I stopped at 20, like, Runner's World tells you to in 1976 or whatever. And then later on, I'm like, what's wrong with 24? That'd be better. And then, nothing magic about 26.2. Why don't I train 30? And like, once you've done 30, then 35. And then, all of a sudden I was doing 45-mile training runs.
Wow.
And then racing 50 miles. And once I started racing those, I started winning, because the first event I ever won in my life was a 50-mile foot race. And I'm like, hey, I actually seem to be good at this. So let me do more of these. And that just kind of, ultra marathoning was first. And I've been doing that for about 3 years now. And then this last 2 years, I started doing ultra triathlons because it's an extension. I was already doing those. And this was kind of like, hey, if I'm good at ultra, maybe I would enjoy doing an ultra triathlon as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how did you find getting into cycling, adding cycling and stuff like that? Did you enjoy it straight away, or?
Yeah. I mean, I've been cycling, to be fair, for about, well, I guess everybody's been cycling since they were a child, right? But at least once a week, even 20, 30 years ago, I would, cycle 50 miles once a week or whatever. And at the time, I thought that was a lot. And now I can't even conceive of even getting suited up for that distance. It's like, not a good use of time. But that's how I kind of started. Was I was always doing it, and then I thought, I've done marathons, and that's okay. Maybe Ironmans would be fun. And I kept trying to learn to train for an Ironman by like taking whatever running I was doing for marathoning at a base level and like just adding cycling to it. And I broke myself a few times doing that, like anybody would, because that's not how you're supposed to do it. And so, but I eventually figured out a way to get it to work. I eventually got my cycling up. And I was a time, to be fair, in my life where I was kind of maybe 2017 to 2019, 2015 to 2019, where I was basically bicycling 200 miles a week and running, 20. I mean, just like not really running, some, but, just not seriously. And I just kind of eventually got it to where I could run 70 to 100 miles a week. And then depending upon what the week was looking like, bike 100 to 200. And that just kind of became the week in, week out. And, and I would go, if you went heavy on the bike, go light on the run. And I eventually found them to cross over and kind of be one event, because cardio is cardio at the end of the day.
Yeah.
If you can, like for Ultraman Florida, I did really well, which was a few months before Australia. I did very well on the bike, and I won the bike stage a day 2. And I was overall the fastest bike split by, a second or 2 or something like that over the 2 days, the first and second day. And I hadn't really been biking because it was rainy and cold in California that year by our standard. And so, but I had run a lot. And if you can run hard for 12 hours, then you can bike for 9.
Yeah.
These things cross over at a high level. At a low level, they kind of don't. But once you're up to consistently above 20 hours a week of training, just cardio is cardio. And you've built the big engine that you can deploy in any way. I mean, you might be vulnerable to, muscular things or, tendon things, et cetera, in case your musculature is not ready for it. But But in terms of cardio, you've got, once you build the engine, you can do whatever you want.
And how did you then start thinking differently when you were training for Ironman? You mentioned you were running and then you just added on cycling. How did you make the shift? Like, did you get a coach or did you just do some research, or what?
No,
what was
I just kind of did it my own way. I just kept trying to, well, first, the way that doesn't work is be running 50 miles a week and then just think, oh, I'll just add bicycling and I'll just keep ramping that linearly. And then you'll just get injured. That's what everybody does. And then they'll get injured doing it. You'll get IT banned and it'll be terrible, especially if you have a road bike that you slap some aero bars onto and makes you all folded up and, uncomfortable. It's not a good recipe. So what I learned was, because I could get in running shape quickly, I said, well, let me just bike first. Let me build that up and then hold it fixed, or even dip it while I ramp the run. So I eventually learned that it didn't really matter what order I did things in. And now I bias heavily just toward run, where I mostly run. And then a few weeks before the event, I throw on some bike and then I'm good. And I like to, well, to be fair, most people would consider this dramatically overtraining, but I like to, like right before an Ironman, I like to do a standalone marathon, like a week before, and 2 weeks before I like to do a double century. So, which is like kind of 12 hours of cycling, 12 hours of zone 2, really.
Right.
So if you think about what an Ironman is, for a certain level of the population, if you're fast enough, that's about what an Ironman is. It's a bunch of zone 2. It's a full day's worth of zone 2 is what it is. If you're executing it properly. And so that's kind of what I do now. I just mostly run because you get the most bang for the buck out of it. And I'm also road racing. Most triathletes they'll hardly run. You can look at pro triathletes today who are, winning and be, way up top, and they'll run 30 miles a week, maybe. They mostly bike because that's most of the event. And it's less chance for injury from their perspective. But since I'm also doing all these foot race events, I train for that and I just add on the bike, because if you're fit enough, then that's fine. That pretty much works well for me. So it's a little bit different than normal, but that's because I'm doing a split of all kinds of road running. Probably 20 or 30 events in this year are just pure road. And then just a handful of cycling events, really.
Okay. That's a lot of volume, because we got to think, even in my head, we got to do the conversion, which is like 70 miles. Yeah, it's a lot of volume all up. But because you'll be running
it's like 110, 120 Ks a week, I guess. That's what I average over the entire year. So it goes up, it goes down, and I like to be in blocks where I'll do about 160 K. To me, if you've done a few weeks of 160 K a week running, you're in pretty good shape. You've got a lot of capability. Though you have to, you bring that up and bring that down, because if you stay there too long, essentially, there's no way you're doing, at least for me, I can't be doing 160K of quality, right? That's base, that's easy stuff. And then, one speed workout a week too. If you were racing that all fast, then running it all fast or, near MP, you'd just be too beat up to be able to, do much else. And that's not the way I like to do it. I like to do, easily 80 to 90% of my volume is zone 2. My average heart rate on a 50K run will be 100 beats per minute. 109 is pretty typical. And the same thing is true for my bike rides. I'll go for a 9-hour bike ride. My heart rate will average to be 100, 110, somewhere in there. I mean, it's all principally zone 2.
Do you monitor it closely, or do you sort of just know based on obviously all the training you've done going on feel?
I'll wear a chest strap once in a while, and I sometimes do it with optically on the. But but mostly at this point, I just know because I do it so often. I just know. When I go on the track, then I monitor it, and I want to make sure I hit a solid zone 4 if that's what the workout calls for, which is usually what I try to do. Then then I do it. Then I'm going for it. But I just know that it's quite low because I train really slowly compared to what I might have when I was younger and more foolish.
Yeah, fair enough. And where does the swim fit into all the training?
I just jam it in at the end because I'm just not any good at it.
Okay.
My main goal is to be able to have the swim not impact being able to hold arrow on the bike. Because from a efficiency standpoint, I know I could put a ton of time in swim training, and I'm gonna get a little bit faster, but not much. So it just doesn't seem like it's worth the time. When I compete in Ultraman, the best I've been able to get is second because there's people who have been swimming for 20 years and they swim 40% faster than me. And I'm just not going to get 20 years worth of experience in a year. It's not going to happen. To be fair, the same thing happens on the run. On the run, I'll go set the course record or be an hour in front of the next guy because I've been running for 40 years. There's just no way that nobody else is going to be able to bring that. They didn't just learn to run and then they go get to do that. Consistency over year to year has a huge amount of value.
That's absolutely. Well, but you still got to do a 10K swim. Like that's.
Yeah. What I'll do is basically the couple of weeks before the event, I'll swim 2 miles, then I'll swim 3 miles, then I'll swim 4 miles, then I'll swim 5 miles, then I'll swim 6 miles, which is almost the event length. 10 kilometers.
Oh, okay.
2 miles. So I will swim so that I have done it. And like the week before the event, I will have swum like 12 miles or something like that. So I do it, but it's all about basically making sure that my shoulders aren't sore after the event, so I can hold myself in arrow. Because that's where you slow down on the bike is when you can't hold arrow because your shoulders wrecked from the swim, and now you're sitting up. And now, because arrow is everything on the bicycle.
Yeah, because I was in my head. I had, if you're not doing much swimming before, I can imagine it would just be a disaster on the day. But yeah, you are still building up to it.
Yeah, it's not like I'm not going at all. Yeah, I'm not doing. Pro triathletes will spend 10 hours a week swimming, and I just do not. I used to spend like an hour a week doing it, but it just didn't really benefit me that much. So I've kind of just let it rest until right before the event, and then I get used to it, so I know that I can do it. And now, of course, also I've done it so many times, I think, wow, it's no big deal. It's like, whereas of course it is a big deal. And I get scared a little bit before, swimming it takes me 4.5 hours to complete that swim in the fresh water and 4 in the ocean. That's a big deal. So I do, practice again, but I'm not going to be great at that part. So I figure just work on the parts that I like and I'm good at. And so I just want to make sure I'm strong on the bike, I'm strong on the run, and I'm physically, my cardio is in a good position. And then if my fitness level is high, then I'll just muddle through the swim. That'll be okay.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a little more sense. I just kind of, because when I was out on course, like just looking even into the water just seems like, how does, what's it like doing the ocean swim? I've never done anything like that myself, but it looks pretty crazy.
It's difficult. It's difficult. The nice part about Noosa is that the water was quite warm. It's the warmest water I've ever swum in. And that was nice, but there was a lot of chop and a lot of current. What does chop mean? There's a lot of waves, and the difference about ocean swimming versus pool swimming is there's no black line. You won't swim straight either. So you just have to look ahead. Once in every few strokes, you look up, which slows you down because your feet sink when your head goes up, and you're trying to figure out where you're supposed to go to. There's some buoy up ahead somewhere, and a lot of the time you look up and you can't see because there's a wave in your face. And then just like when you try to breathe and then, oh, you just got a mouthful of water because you try to breathe at the wrong time. And so those things can cause a lot of fear and panic until you get used to them. And that's just a question of having done the practice and done the events. So I've done them enough now and under much colder situations where even if it's really rough, I'll be okay. I know that I can get there. And in the event, we actually have people right beside us carrying our nutrition, because you do want to be able to take nutrition during a swim that long. And you actually don't sight so much forward as off them. You just look at them and tell them to go buoy to buoy, and you'll just look at them. So you breathe on the right or whatever, you look over there and see them, there they are, and you keep following them. And so it ends up usually being a combination, because sometimes you have to go on your own for a bit, but it's quite a bit different than pool swimming, and very difficult for a lot of triathletes who have just learned to swim in the pool and practiced in the pool.
Yeah. So, what are you taking on during the swim?
I take a carb drink that I make up in advance. I use just some maltodextrin and some fructose and some glucose and some electrolytes. Mix that up in advance. Try to make it pretty high density so I can get a lot of calories in. Make up 2 full bottles so that I can try and get in 300 calories an hour, which is pretty much what your body, between 300 is about what you can take in. Sometimes I'll even add some cellulose starch on it, like cornstarch or potato starch on it to help over time. But that's what you put in there to try and get yourself going. Maybe some caffeine too. Caffeine helps a lot in terms of your perception of effort. And so you take that on, and I drink every 40 minutes or so, every mile. That seems to be about right. And then I've got a kind of a planned, sequence. And so I'll just tell my paddler, hey, and I'll set my watch. My watch goes off every mile. So okay, I'll come off and you give it to me, and then we'll, don't let me miss it. And then you take on calories and you keep going.
Yeah. Okay. And it's not quite like the marathon, for example. Like, for example, when we were running, I used to stress a bit but you can, even when I was taking on nutrition myself, you can kind of chill a little bit more and take some time and then speed up, because I'm used to the anxiety in the marathon where you sort of got to nail it without slowing down.
In marathon, you're always worried about breaking stride and your legs. And ultra marathoning gets worse. You stop and you tighten up. You want to avoid that. Yeah. Although marathoning, you're going faster than you are in ultra marathoning, right? So it's a little bit less stress like that. But usually you go ahead and sit up and you just go ahead and take some pull from the bottle and hand it back, and then now I'll swim some more. You don't try to do it while swimming or anything.
That's what I pictured. Yeah. It's not how that works.
You conceivably could, but I've never tried it, because maybe I will in the future. But it just, a few more minutes doesn't feel that so important when it's 5 stops for a minute to, that is 10 minutes. Maybe I should be doing this. It does add up. But I could do it like a seal, I guess. Roll onto my back and just keep going.
I don't know. So how was that? We'll go into the race. So how was that swim for you? Because obviously I don't think I hadn't even flown in at that point.
It was rough in terms of, there was a lot of chop. The way they had the event going is you started in the Noosa beach right next to the surf house, and you kind of went out to one buoy and then came back, and then you went out to another buoy and came back, and then went out to the first buoy again. And the reason they put those buoys, because that was about as far as you can safely swim, because you get out there and it got real choppy. And so my pace, which is not fast, is about 2 minutes per 100 yards. And that's my nominal pace at that distance. And up near the buoys, it was down to 3, because there was just so much chop and there was so much current against. And at least once I was looking down seeing some rock or, vegetation or whatever. And I'm swimming hard and it's not moving. I'm moving, but it's not moving because the current's coming in. And so I had to really give it the go. And normally I kind of think, well, I'm not a good kicker and I kick too wide like most amateur swimmers, and it drags and slows me down. So I just don't kick. And you don't really need to with wetsuit because the wetsuit lifts up your legs. But there I was kicking for all I was worth to just get as much propulsion as I could get because I was just not moving. You got to get above the current speed in order to make progress. So it was quite a swim, both to get onto the course, out past the breakers because it was a real sand start. And then after you quote unquote finish the course, you had to get off and not have the current pull you back out, which is pretty embarrassing. So there was a couple of times when you're just swimming all out just to try and get, to where you needed to be. But in general, I really like the fact that it was warm and it was super buoyant, that salt water. But boy, my tongue tasted like salt and my mouth was funny for like days, literally. Everything was just, I was not used to that. That's the longest I've ever swum in salt water for sure.
Yeah. And so you obviously have wetsuit. What kind of problems can you run into on the swim? Like, is there chafing issues or what?
There typically is, and it will. You're out there so long, you'll rub some air. You really pretty raw.
I saw that. Yeah. So you had a bit of
I had a lot of red soup burn. Although I've had worse, to be fair. And I didn't have to wear a thermal hat, which is usually a strap around your chin, which also usually gives me the look that I've been hung, literally. So yeah, that's usually a problem. That was probably the best that I've ever had it just about. We did a good job of putting on the chafe. But you come on out, you get out of there, it's kind of a transition where you're getting vertical after being horizontal more or less for 4 hours. And then they help you get your wetsuit off. And don't forget, you started this swim at 6 a.m. or whatever, and you were out there 4 or 5 hours. You get some solid food into you. So the goal of the kind of transition when you get out of the water is, I try to get a sandwich and I get some real food in before I get off and going on the bike. It was gently raining, so that was a little bit of a, not really a complication, but can be a little cooling. And so I was a little bit worried all through the event that it was going to be cold rain, but I didn't. I'm thinking Northern California because our rain is cold. We have cold in the winter, and it's cold water, and it can really, really freeze you. But there it was kind of a warm rain, so it wasn't a big deal. We got mostly threatened to be raining during the whole rest of the event, and it mostly did rain very hard for short periods of time, but not that long. I mean, it was 45 minutes a day, maybe something like that. It wasn't a lot. So it threatened to be worse than it was. So I was a little bit worried, when we started off that it would be a real factor, but it turned out not to be.
Yeah. And then, so you get out of the swim, eat something solid onto the bike. I am curious, what you've been already exercising for that long. What's sort of going through your head after that, or are you just kind of really used to it?
It's the good news about it is like, analogy for triathletes is when you've been biking hard for a few hours, you get off and you're going to run, you're not actually tired because biking is tiring on your legs, but not your cardio. If you're a fit runner, that's not what's being stressed. And it's like that. Swimming, your arms are tired and you don't want to pull anymore and your arms are tired. But, my average heart rate when I swim is like 100 also. It's like loafing. No matter how fast I swim is like, it's not running, you were doing things, but you're not tired. You're glad to get out of the swimming and your arms may be tired. But although hopefully not too much because you trained enough for it, but it's once you get biking, then you feel good. And since swimming is the hardest part for me, I always feel a sense of relief when I get out of the water. I'm like, oh, the hard part's over. Now's the fun part. And that's one big major milestone of the event's done. Like, oh, the swim's over. Great. Now it's time to bike. And so you can get out there and get going. And to some degree, you're with a bike, you're always worried a little bit about mechanicals and, the mechanics of the situation and the logistics of it. So that always, it's not relaxing to some degree because you're always worried about that until you really get in there and get moving. And then you're like, okay, now I'm doing the thing. Now I can just, zone in and, do what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And how was the bike?
The bike was good. It wasn't, I think, I didn't do quite as well as I had done in my last couple of Ultraman, but it was a hillier course. And honestly, I think the caliber of the Australian cyclist was higher than I'd recently raced against. So I didn't do as well relative to the field. And I mean, immeasurably, I was a little slower. I averaged about, for all the bike sections in Florida, I measured about 20. I averaged about 20 miles per hour. For all the bike sections in Arizona, I think I averaged 18 in a hillier course. And I think in Australia, I think I averaged around 19. So it was a little slower than my best times in such an event, but around that. But it was a nice course. It's all roundabouts in Australia, so that was nice. I mean, there were a couple of lights that you had to wait at, but not very many. So, and the road quality was generally pretty good. The rural roads, I think, were better in Australia than I've had to race against in the United States mostly. So I'd say generally the bike went pretty well. Yeah.
Okay. And I have to ask because I'm not sure how the bikes work. What bike did you choose, and how do you go about choosing which bike you're going to race in, and stuff like that?
Oh yeah. So I race on most people race on just a TT bike, like you might, a time trial bike that you might choose for an Ironman, that kind of bike. What's different about that kind of bike versus just a road bike is that it's got aero bars. So you get your hands out in front of you and together instead of holding yourself up high on the hoods or the drops, and that presents less frontal area. So you have less drag. And you typically have very deep wheels that are aerodynamic, have lower drag, so that you can put out the same amount of power that you might on a normal road bike, but you'll go faster because the drag is lower. And so pretty much everybody rides these Ironman style bikes. I didn't start out using those. Last year I did two Ultraman, one in Florida, one in Arizona, just with a regular road bike with aero bars on it. And by the second, I noticed that I was the only one doing this. Everybody else had a TT bike. And then by the second event, I got deep wheels, and that helped. But this year, when I started riding a TT bike, then I was doing the best because I was still putting out the same amount of power, but now I was going faster because I had less drag. So I'd purchased a Cervelo P5, which is a standard, very nice TT bike. And that's really done well for me in terms of helping my speed. And also the bottom bracket's a little bit further up front, so it's a position which doesn't stress your IT band as much as a road bike. Okay. Okay. And what are you? Yeah, because I saw the bike and it looked very serious. And they're super light. They're super light. But this is someone that knows nothing about bikes. But what are you doing for nutrition on the bike? How do you normally do that? Well, so Ironman is different than Ultraman. In Ultraman, you have a crew. After the swim, which you do have somebody paddling, right, handing you nutrition whenever you want it. Likewise, in the bike, your crew follows you in a car, and as often as they want, they can go up ahead and stop and then stand there on the road and hand you a new bottle. Just like you're in the Tour de France and you're getting a bottle handed to you, except for they can't do it like in Tour de France where they stick it out the window and let you grab it. You can't do that. But they go up and they stop and they wait for you and say, hey, do you want, what do you want? And then you tell them, and then they give it to you. And so it's very different from an Ironman, where in Ironman you have to carry all your stuff or get it from the aid station. In Ultraman, there
Yeah.
are no aid stations because it's a small event, and your crew just goes along with you and gives you whatever you want. But what I do like to do for the first day, because it's pretty short, it's only 90 miles, which is like 4.5 hours. You can, when you get out of the water and you put your jersey on, you can put, all the food you're going to need in your pockets, like 4, 5, 6 bars and some fluids. That might be enough. You might at best need some fluids for that first day. So usually on the first day, I usually don't take anything from my crew, or very little, especially if it's not hot.
Yeah.
If it gets hot, then you'll consume a lot more liquid, and then you're going to need a lot of support from your crew. If it's cold and rainy, as it was, you don't sweat much. At least I don't. I don't sweat when it's not hot. And so I won't need much liquid. And so I didn't need, I think, any support, or maybe once. I think maybe once I got a shell when it was raining hard, and then gave away 10 minutes later when we realized it was going to stop raining. But I just wouldn't take much. Day 2 is a different story, because you're out there all day. It's going to be 9 hours of cycling, and you're going to carry a bunch of food. But I also like to stop and get like a proper lunch when it's lunchtime, because you can have bars and gels and things like that, but in a short event, that's fine. But in a long event, you still have to just keep the light bulb lit, which is, base calorie consumption of, some adult male my size is 1,600 calories. So you need to get that in anyway, in addition to the per hour that you like to take in to keep things fresh.
Right.
With your blood sugar. So I'll carry some with me, because you never know what happens to your crew. They get stuck. There's all kinds of things that can happen, but I like to have 1 or 2 things of each on mine. But generally, I'll kind of carry a bunch of things, and then once it gets hot or I'm out of fluid, then I'll be asking my crew for things.
Yeah. And so you finish that, and then you head into day 2. So what are you doing for recovery? Like, I remember seeing you after the race, had a quick chat. You were still, I imagined you to be sort of dying, but you were just talking about how the race is going. And I was kind of shocked, because I just arrived, I had my suitcase, and then saw you at the finish line. So I was like, geez, that's after all that exercise. But so you go, I remember you went to get a massage, and then we sort of just go and get food in and try and unwind.
That's right. I mean, and I was, to be fair, jamming my face full of stuff as soon as I got across the line. I was like having, peanut butter pretzels and Gatorade kind of things, getting in simple carbs to replenish. People ask me all the time, because I do a lot of events, how I recover. And this is no different. Is one of the ways you recover is by being in shape for the thing that you're doing, number 1. And number 2, being adequately fed during that event. So it's hard to recover if you were undertrained and you underfueled yourself during the event and you're totally wrecked when you finish. But if you train properly for the event, and you kept yourself really fueled, and then you eat quickly afterwards to get your glycogen stores replenished in your muscles, then that's the right recipe. And then you get good sleep. And those are the things that are the right things. And then a massage is helpful, but not the most important factor. The most important factor is those things we talked about. And so, as soon as I got across the line, as soon as I could recover from whatever kick I was putting down, then it was, getting simple carbs in. Even while I was getting massaged, I'm stuffing my face, and then it's, get home, rest a little bit, eat a proper meal with some good protein, and get ready for the next day.
Yeah. When I got there, because we had obviously Robbie and Kelsey doing a lot of the crewing, so preparing the food and stuff like that. When we got to the place, it just, like, stuff was stuff is everywhere. Like it just you forget, like, for example, when you just do a marathon or like a just a road run, you forget when you transition to something like this. For me, it was eye-opening because there's just so much that goes into it, that you have to consider. That's not just the exercising. So I think there was a lot of preparation in terms of, you even had your own gels, which was interesting. Yeah, it was cool. It was cool to see, but it seemed like you were pretty used to it at that point. Obviously, you've
Yeah.
done five. That was your fifth, or that was your
That was my
sixth?
fifth. That was my fifth. That was my
Yeah.
fifth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I've done a number of these things, and of course lots of also ultra marathons and things like that, what I prep for. So you just learned what you need. Yeah, there's a lot of logistics involved for sure. I remember when I did my first triathlon, it was bewildering. And like you check in and they give you these three bags, and this is the run transition bag, and this is the bike, and then where do my other stuff goes, and my swim stuff, and what do I put with my morning clothes? And it's all very bewildering when you first start. And this was no different. But then once you've done it a few times, you become second nature, and you know what you need. And one of the dangers though is kind of the controlled descent into terrain problem, where you're just so used to it, you don't take it seriously, even though you know it's serious. And so that does happen. Like they say that sometimes experienced skydivers just die because they're so used to it and comfortable, they forget to open the chute.
Okay.
So that sometimes it can be like that, but you get too used to it. But in general, I've done it lots of times, and every time with a new crew, just about. So I'm used to having to tell people what we need to get, and I know what we need to get. So it's pretty straightforward at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay, so how did day two, how did you sleep? I'm curious, like, do you normally sleep okay?
It has varied. The first time I did it, I was wrecked and buzzing and excited, and I slept poorly. And I often sleep poorly the night before events, but I didn't sleep well. But the last couple of events I've done, I've slept pretty well. In Australia, I slept pretty well, honestly. I think I got good sleep most nights. I would at least get 5-6 hours, reasonable quality sleep each night. I've done a lot worse. I've done, where I only got like an hour, and you're sitting there lying there, especially if you take enough caffeine to actually help your performance, then you're so jacked up. It can be hard to sleep, and your body's just buzzing, I usually sleep poorly after these things too, because your body is so destroyed. You're just so wired, everything's sore. It can be very hard to get to sleep, hard to relax and get to sleep.
Yeah. Okay. And then how was the bike on day two?
The bike was great on day two. It was early start. I pushed pretty hard in the beginning, and pulled a lot of the group along for a long way, honestly. As the day wore on, I was feeling a little less strong, but it was still reasonable. I managed to avoid any serious errors in navigation, which I'm often prone to. That worked out pretty well. So I didn't really do more than I was supposed to, or get lost or anything like that. So I'd say it was generally worked pretty well. I was able to climb pretty well. My overall speed wasn't quite as much as I would hoped. I got caught in a construction light, which cost me an extra 10 minutes.
Okay.
But so that was not ideal. But other than that, the day went well. It poured on us a little bit, but that was okay. Generally speaking, no mechanicals, which is something you really hope for in the bike, and able to equip myself reasonably well throughout the day.
Yeah. Okay. And then same situation, end of day two, I saw you just chirpy and still in good spirit, which is, I imagine, good, because means you haven't run into any issues and your energy levels are still okay leading into day three.
Well, you can always, sometimes there are dull spots, but it's easy to, and I I always tell people this who are crewing for me, not to get stressed about it, because it's easy to view it because you're serious about it as this stuff that's super important. But honestly, it's not. No lives are at stake here. This is no livelihoods are at stake. This is just something fun.
Yeah.
And even if things don't go as well as you want, you have to like remind yourself that, hey, all these people around me are doing this to help me, and this is just a fun thing. And if I don't make it fun for them, then they won't want to do it again, and they'll regret having decided to help me. So we need to make this a fun thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it's got to go. And so you got to have the attitude about the event, which is, this is just a bit of silliness where we finish up where we started, and we were not achieving anything from a thermodynamic perspective, right? We're just exerting work over no distance and then ending up in the same place we started. So it's just a bit of fun, and you have to keep that in mind, that's what this is. This is we're doing this to have fun, and it needs to be fun for everybody. And that's your goal. And once you do that, it makes, sometimes you can lose it. Sometimes you can lose track of that, and you got to get yourself back together and say, hey, let's have the right attitude about this. And that's one thing that makes this event different than Ironman, which is kind of it's an achievement-based thing. People think about their placing, and did they PR, and did they always do better than the last time? And running can be like that too, if you want it to be. Ironman kind of usually is, and running often is. But I find it to be more enjoyable if you take it from a place of trying to focus on what you want out of it. And it seemed to me, even a few years ago, I kind of had the realization that it's silly to do something that's 3 or 6 or 10 or 12 hours long and then be happy or not based upon the time that you crossed the line with. It's like, shouldn't you enjoy the whole thing? Otherwise, that seems like a real poor investment. And so I try to enjoy the act of doing it, and the achievement. I don't need one more thing to achieve at. That's not what I'm looking for out of it. I'm looking to enjoy the thing. And the thing was, was going well. So that was a good time. And that is, mostly you want to be able to, in athletic pursuit, be able to put your training to use, feel the speed, feel the excitement, look at the course, see the beauty, have fun out there with your friends or your new acquaintances doing something. That's what you want out of it. Not necessarily what you placed, even though you can take pride in that, or what the time was, even though you can, make it more exciting by trying to get a PR or whatever. I find it's not as rewarding if you're only focused on that. Because you won't always get that. And
that was a big thing that I noticed, at least, is I felt like although I sort of came in more on the run, but you saw everyone sort of working together really well. And it was something that I hadn't experienced before in a race. Like in the marathon, you just have people cheering and a lot goes into it. But in this, it's a lot more personal, and you're all sort of working together, and it felt like we were sort of much more a part of your race, obviously. So it was really special. I really enjoyed it. And okay, so day 3 was the run. To be honest, I was shitting myself a bit because I hadn't done anything longer. I think my training had been very not much volume. So and also I'd never worn a vest. I'd never worn the vest before. I've never handled nutrition. But it was one of those things where for me it kind of just worked out. Like, you just got into the hang of it, and obviously you briefed me and everything like that. So could you pick up that I was sort of shitting myself a bit?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's you're done marathons, right? But you hadn't been an ultra marathon. You hadn't done an ultra marathon yet.
Yeah.
And so it's a very different world. But to recap how this works is in versus a regular marathon, you go run and you get stuff from the aid stations, right? That's how it works.
Yeah.
But Ultraman is very it's a very small event. There'll be like 40 something people who are willing to do something this silly. And so you go out and your crew can come from a car and help you and give you things, and they can run alongside you. And so I've had up to 4 before, but this time we had 2, you and Robbie, people who run beside me, and you can do what's called muling, which is where you can wear the vest that the ultramarathoner usually wears with the fluids and the snacks and stuff like that. And you carry it. And then I just ask you for it whenever I want them, and you hand it to me. And so and that's kind of what you do, which is really nice. And then in certain sections you can't crew me because of traffic restrictions or whatever. And so I'll wear the vest in that section. And so, and this is, the 6th time I've done it. And the very first time I was really scared to go fast because I'd done a 50-mile foot race and been good at it and won actually a couple of times. And so I felt, real comfortable racing that 50-mile distance, which for those of you who have, been marathoning or less, may seem like an impossible distance, but you go slower, and it's just a different kind of thing. But I was so scared because I didn't know what was going to happen to my legs. And when I discovered that it doesn't seem to make that much of a difference. I mean, it's a little bit. My PR for 50 miles is 6:03, which would be like kind of a 6:17 maybe equivalent of 52 miles. And in Florida, my PR, I did 6:34 with four different pacers. And so sometimes that's possible. The last couple of events I haven't gone as well, and I ended up being around 6:54, 6:40, somewhere in there, which is somewhere in there is what I did for Arizona. I think around 6:50 something. I think I don't remember exactly, but in Australia. But basically, we get out and got going, and we did. I did the first 13 with Robbie, and then you came on, and then we did. I did the first
50K.
Oh, you did the first 50K, or you did the last 50K? First 50K, well, from mile 5 or so, right? We had to go 8K or so before we could join.
You're right. Yeah. So, So I came in. So then we got started. It was good. Like the vest wasn't that as bad as I thought, and you were taking on a good amount. I think we had a chat the night before about sort of like how much you actually need to take on. You and Robbie were like, I think you need to consider taking more fuel on in your races.
Yeah. As we were describing, when we were talking about your marathoning, that you, like most runners, dramatically under fuel. You should be at least having a gel every 5K, and that's just about every runner out there. And they don't. Like, I took 1 gel for the marathon. Is that enough? No, it's not enough.
That's kind of how it works. But we had Morton, and we just had water, and we were just cycling through, and it was good because I could run beside you. And then because we didn't chat heaps, but we were still chatting, but like, I was still focusing on what I had to do because it was new for me. And then because you were also making sure you were getting the right line on the run as well. So we had to...
that's right. Taking the shortest line, which, it's just kind of a habit. I don't know if it's really so important, but that's, something we always do is take the shortest line. It's just road racing 101. But it was, exciting. One of the things that was exciting about the foot event was that there were supposed to be some really fast people there. One of them dropped out previously, the guy who used to have the world record for the event. He had actually dropped out on the bike, so he wasn't there. And who was there was Simon. Simon was a pro triathlete from New Zealand, and he was, in the whole race, he was just setting, the event on fire. And he's, he's a professional triathlete. He's not just somebody's dad who's doing it for fun. So he was really crushing it. and he took off at a good pace, and I went ahead and went with him for a while, and it was a reasonable pace. And it was funny because we did notice at least one young competitor, Thomas, went out way ahead of us, and we're both like, that's just way too fast. We're not doing that. And I went with Simon for the first 5 miles, and that was just fun. But once you joined me, we went with him for maybe 1 or 2 hills.
We just let him.
Because he was sticking to pace and not time or not effort. And I like to stick to a constant effort, because I find peaking your effort to maintain the pace up a short hill is not a good use of time or energy, because you blow a bunch of energy, and it didn't really matter because it was short anyway. It's just not so important, especially early on. So we let him go, and stayed in second position really the whole way out, first marathon. And then we bobbled up the turnaround a little bit, and so we got behind to, I think we lost a couple positions at the turnaround.
Yeah, that wasn't great.
That's life,
Yeah.
That the athlete's responsibility to know the course, just happens, right? And sometimes you get these things right, and sometimes you don't. But and we clawed one of them back right away. I did a shoe change. It was wet. I probably didn't need to do a shoe change, and I lost a couple of minutes because of that. But then I got new dry shoes, and I had a little bit of a rest. So hey, that was pretty nice. And then we went back after. Immediately took back from fourth back to third, and then just continued to work and just enjoy the rest of the run back. Enjoy suffer. It's a euphemism in this case. It was pretty tiring, as it always is. Between, like I told you on the event, between 30 and 40 miles and 50 miles, pretty terrible, because you're already tired, but you're not near the end. So you can't smell the finish. Once you get to 40 or so, then you can start to smell the finish. And like you only have 10 miles to go. Okay, it just gets better and better. But there's a certain point where you're over halfway, but you're just not anywhere near the end. That can get tiresome.
When the turnaround, so it was for about 42K, I think you put Alpha Flies on, which seemed, I don't know, might not have made a difference. It seemed like it made a difference. I don't know. They seem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a change. There's less energy return in the Alpha Flies than they were in the Adidas Prime X's that I was wearing, but my feet were a little soggy because it had been raining earlier, and the dry socks were nice, and I had a little bit of a rest, and so it was just a nice little change. It was probably worth it just for that kind of rest. And then we got going. That did help pick it up. And we were able to go, and it was pretty nice because it was taking you to your first 50K. Which I think happened by about mile 35 or so, 36,
something like that. I went through the 42 and was feeling like okay, and then I think a few more Ks I was just struggling so much and just thinking like, how has this guy done 2 days of exercise? And then, but to be fair, I'm not conditioned for it, but it made me, in that moment, it made me appreciate like how crazy the event is. Because I just started, you were pretty much pacing me towards the end. And I was like, Robbie, please join in. But it was really, I was happy to get to 50K. I was crushed at that point. It was, I don't know. It made me appreciate it. But obviously, like you said in the earlier parts of the episode, you've done this a lot in training, and it just shows that you need to condition your body for it. But then, so you were like, you weren't slowing down at that point at all, which was great to see.
It was a very, very reasonable return trip. I was getting a little bit stiff, and you naturally will stiffen up in the end of a long run like that. So in the beginning, you're just fine. Any little up and downs, no big deal. And then later on, like every undulation of the trail is a personal insult, and you just can't believe it. Like curbs, who did curbs? How ridiculous! What a terrible idea. Why should I have to step over a curb? That's impossible. It's you're just so optimized for a little time. It just becomes crazy. But that's just kind of the nature of the beast. The longer you go, it will be like that. And then I can't remember if we had a gap or not. And then Robbie picked up.
Yep, Robbie jumped in.
And then we cruised it for a long ways, all the way in, I think. And then and it was it's a pretty nice out and back course there with not a lot of stops. Some climbs, maybe 8 miles before the end, and then a lot of descent in. So that was all pretty fine. Kind of the most exciting part was when we kind of popped out to the beach. Well, before that, we were maybe 5K before the end, and somebody was coming up on us, somebody that had passed earlier.
Yeah.
And I made a big surge, which at that was like going from 9-minute miles back down to 7:30s or something like that. From afar, that wouldn't look fantastic, but at the time, that far in, it's a big deal. And left them behind. And then when we got to the beach, then we saw the person who was in second. And the way Ultraman works is you often cross the line with your retinue, your whole support crew. And they're out there jogging along the beach. And I just go into kick mode. And I always kick. It's kind of a signature, just because that's, your runner, that's what you're supposed to do. It doesn't matter how tired you are, you kick. That's what you do. Yeah. And so I'm sprinting on the beach. And then all of a sudden, and somebody shouting, from the sidelines, and all of a sudden, somebody in the crew of the second place guy looks back, and they're like, "Oh shit!" And so they start running, and I mean, they were all running, but the Steve, who got second place, didn't hold at their pace. He just went ahead and finished. So he ended up still finishing like a minute in front of me, and I was maybe 10 seconds behind his crew, but. Basically, we managed to close quite a bit on the beach, so much so that I would have wished I'd have closed a little bit earlier, but honestly, that probably wasn't possible. I mean, I think from mile 40, somebody kept saying, you kept saying, lots of people kept saying, oh, there's somebody just, they're a minute behind you. I'm like, if they can get me, they're welcome to it. They deserve it.
Yeah.
I can't go any faster.
No, not at that point. But I couldn't. One thing, it was cool to see everyone come in at the beach, but also I was thinking that, oh my goodness, your legs would be just crushed trying to run on sand at the end there. What was it? Because was it crazy at the end there?
It wasn't particularly painful. It was slow. It was all the question about how to take the line on the sand, right? Because what you have to do is have to get out to the water where it's firm and be on that borderline. And I spent too much time on the soft stuff. But that's true of sand races everywhere, right? You got to get to the firm part by the water and make as much time as you can on that before cutting back across the the soft stuff. So it was just annoying because I wanted to get more speed than I could get.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. All right. Well, I guess conscious of time, that sort of wraps it up. But I normally just end on one question. Just what's been your favorite race, like overall? Do you have a favorite race?
No, I mean, I generally enjoy, most fondly the thing that's freshest. So, Ultraman Australia was pretty awesome. So I, really enjoyed that. That was, it was great to have the warm water. It was great to have the not cold rain. The weather generally was cooperative, not super hot, because I was worried about the Australian sunshine and wasn't really a factor. So it all went pretty well.
Yeah. Oh, good stuff. Well, thank you. Well, thanks for inviting me to the event and allowing me to be a part of it. I really appreciate it. And thanks for coming on the podcast as well.
Cheers.